They rebuilt their lives without each other, but some love doesn't end. It waits. The cafe was quieter than it had any right to be at 7 in the morning. Not empty, just hushed. The kind of place where people lowered their voices without being asked. Where the clink of porcelain sounded louder than conversation. She chose it for that reason. Evelyn sat by the window, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. Outside, the street was still waking up. A delivery truck idled. Someone jogged past, breath visible in the cool air. She had arrived early. She always did now. It was a habit she'd picked up over the years, being prepared, being settled. Not rushing into moments that mattered. This one mattered more than she wanted to admit. The door opened. She didn't look up right away. She felt it first. The shift. The awareness she hadn't experienced in years and yet recognized instantly. Then she lifted her eyes. Daniel stood just inside the doorway. Coat still on, scanning the room as if he already knew what he'd find. When their eyes met, he stopped. It wasn't dramatic. No sharp intake of breath. No visible reaction anyone else would notice. But something passed between them, quiet and exact. Like a memory being reopened. He walked toward her slowly. She noticed things she hadn't expected to notice. The gray at his temples. The way his shoulders seemed more settled, less restless. The familiar steadiness in his walk that had once made her feel safe. He reached the table and hesitated. "Evelyn," he said. His voice was lower than she remembered. Or maybe she was hearing it differently now. "Daniel." That was all they said for a moment. He pulled out the chair across from her. "Is this okay?" "Yes," she said. "Of course," he sat, placing his hands on the table. Then pulling them back as if unsure where they belonged, a server appeared. Poured coffee without asking. And disappeared again. Evelyn watched the steam rise. "So," he said. A faint smile appearing and fading just as quickly. "This place hasn't changed," she nodded. "Some things don't." The words landed heavier than intended. She let them sit. He glanced out the window. "You look, well, thank you." She took a breath. "You do too." They both knew what they weren't saying. That looking well didn't mean life had been simple. That surviving didn't mean untouched. Daniel wrapped his hands around his cup. "I almost didn't come." "I know." That surprised him. He looked at her more closely now. "I almost didn't ask," she added. Silence returned. Thicker this time. Not uncomfortable. Just full. They had once been good at silence together. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes," he said. "I wasn't sure either." She finally took a sip of her coffee. It was too hot. She welcomed the sting. "I heard about your move," he said. "A few years back." "Yes, after the kids left for college." She paused. "I wanted something smaller, quieter." "That sounds like you." She smiled faintly. "It does now." He hesitated. "And you? I mean, are you happy?" It was a fair question. Not an easy one. "I'm steady," she said. "I've built a good life." He nodded slowly. "That matters." "Yes." He looked like he wanted to ask more. He didn't. She noticed the restraint. It was new. Or maybe it was what time did to people who had already lost something once. "Daniel," she said gently. "Why now?" He leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing, not in defensiveness but in thought. "I asked myself that," he admitted. "More than once, and I realized I was tired of pretending." The past had nothing left to say. Her chest tightened. Just enough to remind her she was still vulnerable. "I didn't come to disrupt your life," he added quickly. "Or mine. I know. I just needed to see you. To know how you were. To know if this feeling I carried was memory or something unfinished." She looked at him then. Really looked. Across the table was the man she had loved deeply and left carefully. The man she had mourned while still breathing. The man she had learned to live without. "I wondered that too," she said quietly. His eyes lifted to hers. "When?" "More times than I can count." Outside, a bus hissed to a stop. Someone laughed on the sidewalk. Life continued, indifferent to the moment unfolding inside the cafe. Daniel reached toward the sugar packet, then stopped. His fingers hovering just short of the table's edge. She noticed. Of course she did. The almost touch, the space where history lived. "I should tell you," he said. His voice careful now. "I'm not here because I regret the life I built. I wouldn't want you to be. But I regret how we ended." Her breath caught that. "At least," was something they shared. "We did the best we could," she said. "With what we knew." He nodded. "That's what I tell myself." And yet, he echoed. The door opened again, letting in a rush of cold air. Evelyn shivered, though she wasn't cold. Daniel noticed and shrugged out of his coat. Placing it over the back of his chair instead of offering it, she appreciated that too. They sat there. To people who had loved and learned and aged into quieter versions of themselves. Nothing had been resolved. Nothing needed to be. Not yet, but something had shifted. Evelyn looked down at her hands. Then back up at him. "Daniel," she said, her voice steady but soft, "what happens now?" He met her gaze, and for the first time since he'd arrived, He didn't look certain. I don't know, he said honestly. And somehow, that felt like the beginning rather than the end. The cafe door closed behind them with a soft chime. Outside, the morning had warmed into something almost gentle. The sidewalk was busy now. People with earbuds. People with purpose. People who didn't know their whole lives could tilt in a single hour. Evelyn walked beside Daniel without touching him. Their shoulders were close enough that she could feel the heat of him through her coat. But neither of them crossed that last inch. At the corner, he slowed. Do you want to? Keep talking? She could have said no. It would have been cleaner, safer. The kind of choice she'd gotten good at making. Instead, she heard herself say yes. Just not there. He glanced down the street. There's a park a few blocks over. She nodded. They walked in step, quiet. The way strangers sometimes are when they share the same destination, only they weren't strangers. That was the problem. The park was small and well-kept, tucked between two residential streets. Winter had thinned the trees, leaving branches like dark handwriting against a pale sky. A few benches faced a pond that wasn't quite frozen, the surface trembling in the breeze. Daniel chose a bench in the sun. Evelyn sat with careful space between them. Not distant, just deliberate. He looked out at the pond, then at his hands, as if checking they were real. I forgot what it's like, he said. What? She asked. To be near you and not know what to do with my body. It was said plainly, without drama. That made it worse. That made it true. Evelyn let out a quiet breath. I didn't come here to reopen old wounds. I know, he said. Neither did I. A flock of birds cut across the sky in a ragged line. Evelyn watched them until they disappeared behind the bare trees. She should have asked questions. She should have demanded clarity. She should have taken control of the moment the way she took control of everything else in her life. But the truth was, she had been in control for so long that part of her was tired. So, she said, turning slightly toward him, tell me about your life. The one you built. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's good. That's not an answer. He glanced at her, a flicker of humor. Still direct. I'm older, she said. Not softer. I didn't expect soft. He paused. I live outside Boston now. Closer to the water. It's quiet. That sounds nice. It is. Most days. His jaw tightened, then eased. I work too much. I tell myself it's purpose. Sometimes it's just avoidance. Evelyn nodded slowly. We're good at that. He looked at her as if he wanted to disagree. He didn't. And you, he said. What did you do with all that stubborn strength? She almost laughed. Almost. I used it, she said. I built something stable. I made sure the bills got paid without panic. I learned how to fix leaky faucets and change tires. I stopped waiting for someone else to come home. Daniel's throat moved as he swallowed. I didn't mean it like that, he said quietly. I know, her voice softened. But it's what happened. He stared at the pond again, eyes fixed on the water. I used to picture you, sometimes not in a fantasy way. Just like a habit, she said. Yes, he exhaled. Like my mind kept checking on you, even when I couldn't. Evelyn's hands were folded in her lap. She realized her fingers were gripping each other too hard and forced them to relax. I checked on you too, she admitted. More than I should have. His head turned, surprised. You did. I'm not proud of it, she said. But yes, a silence settled between them again, different from the cafe. This one felt open. Daniel shifted on the bench. His knee brushing hers for half a second. He froze. Evelyn didn't move away. But she didn't lean in either. That tiny contact felt louder than it should have. He cleared his throat. Do you remember the house on Maple? Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. Of course, you hated the kitchen. It was the cabinets, she corrected. They were practically falling off, and you still cooked in there. A small smile appeared. You'd stand at the stove, hair up, arguing with the radio like it had personally offended you. Evelyn's chest tightened with a strange, sweet ache. Don't what? Don't make it pretty, she said, her voice low. Not yet. Daniel's smile faded. He nodded. Okay, he sat back, hands clasped. Then tell me what you want me to know. Evelyn stared at the pond. The water was dark and restless. I want you to know, she said slowly, that I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. Daniel's eyes didn't leave her face. I left because I didn't recognize myself anymore, she continued. I didn't like the person I was becoming in that life. Not because of you as a man. Because of us as a dynamic. His brow furrowed. I didn't know you felt that way. I didn't know how to say it, Evelyn said. And you didn't know how to hear it back then. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's fair. Evelyn finally looked at him. Do you ever think about that night? His face changed instantly. The memory was there, sharp and immediate. Yes, he said. More than I want to, so do I. The air between them thickened. A deeper current beneath the calm surface. Daniel's voice lowered. When you called me and said you weren't coming home. Evelyn's gaze dropped to his hands. The knuckles were pale where he held them together. I remember your silence, she said. Not what you said. What you didn't say. Daniel's eyes flashed with something hurt, anger, grief, all woven together. I didn't know what to say. You never did, Evelyn said, and then she regretted it. His shoulders stiffened. He looked away. Evelyn swallowed. That wasn't fair. It was true, he said quietly. But it wasn't the whole truth. Evelyn's heart slowed, as if listening that Daniel turned back to her. Eyes steady now. I want to tell you something, he said. And I want to tell it right this time, her breath caught. Okay, he hesitated, then spoke carefully. As if setting something fragile on the table between them. That night, he said. I wasn't silent because I didn't care. I was silent because I thought if I said the wrong thing, you'd disappear forever. Evelyn's throat tightened. Daniel. And then you did anyway, he added, not accusing. Just stating it. Evelyn blinked hard, her eyes hot. She hated that her body still reacted to him like this. That her chest still hurt in the same places. I did, she whispered. I did. A child's laughter echoed from the other side of the park, bright and distant. Daniel inhaled slowly. There's something else. Evelyn's pulse ticked higher. What? He rubbed his thumb over his ring finger bare now, and she noticed he did it absent-mindedly. Like an old reflex, he caught her looking and dropped his hand. I didn't come here to ask for anything, Daniel said. But I can't keep pretending there isn't a reason this has followed me. Evelyn held still. His eyes searched hers. You never knew everything that happened after you left. Evelyn's stomach tightened. What do you mean? Daniel leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, voice lowered. I got a letter, he said. A few weeks after you moved out. Evelyn stared at him. A letter from who? His gaze stayed on hers, steady and serious. From you, he said. Except that wasn't written to me. Evelyn's breath stopped. The park, the pond, the cold air, all of it blurred for a moment. I don't understand, she managed. Daniel's expression was tight with restraint. Like he'd carried this sentence in his mouth for years. I think, he said quietly. Someone made sure you and I never got the chance to tell each other the truth. Evelyn's hands went cold in her lap, and without meaning to. She asked the only thing she could force out of her throat. What letter? Daniel didn't answer right away. The wind moved across the pond, breaking the surface into small, uneven ripples. Evelyn watched them because looking at him felt suddenly dangerous. I never opened it, he said. She turned sharply. What? I read the first line, he clarified. Your name was on the envelope, but it wasn't addressed to me. I knew that much immediately. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Then why did you keep it? He met her gaze. Because it didn't make sense. And because I didn't trust coincidence. Evelyn pressed her palms together, grounding herself in the cold. Where is it? At home, Boston? Yes, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Relief and frustration tangled together. You're telling me this now? She asked, careful to keep her voice even. I didn't know if I should, he said honestly. And then this morning, sitting across from you, I realized not knowing has been worse than knowing ever could be. She looked down at the ground, at a crack in the pavement filled with old leaves. I don't remember writing any letter. That doesn't mean you didn't, he said gently. It does. She replied, more sharply than she intended. She softened immediately. I'm sorry. Daniel, I don't write letters like that. Not even then, he nodded. That's what bothered me. Silence settled again, heavier this time. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that demanded attention. Evelyn stood abruptly. She hadn't planned to. Her body had simply decided, I need to walk, she said. Daniel stood too, a beat behind her. Okay, they moved along the path that circled the pond, their steps uneven. She walked faster than before, arms folded tight against her body. So you think someone intercepted something I wrote? She asked. I think something happened between us that neither of us fully understood, he said. And I think it mattered. She stopped walking and turned to him. Who would do that? He hesitated. I have an idea. Her chest tightened. Say it, Daniel exhaled slowly. Your sister. Evelyn stared at him, stunned. Claire. She was the one who found the letter in my mailbox, he said. She said it must have been misdelivered. That doesn't make sense, Evelyn said quickly. Claire wouldn't. She didn't hand it to me, he continued. She asked what I wanted to do with it. Evelyn's head felt light. And you said? I said I didn't know. They stood there, the bare trees towering above them like witnesses. My sister doesn't interfere, Evelyn said. More to herself than to him. She never has. Daniel didn't argue. He simply waited. Evelyn closed her eyes. She remembered that time clearly now. The weeks after she left. The fragile way everything had felt. Claire had come by often. Too often, maybe. Bringing food. Asking questions. Offering opinions Evelyn hadn't asked for. You were emotional, Claire had said once. You shouldn't make big decisions right now. Evelyn opened her eyes. I don't know what to do with this, she said quietly. I didn't either, Daniel replied. That's why I put the letter in a drawer and tried to move on. And yet you didn't know, he said. Neither of us did. They resumed walking, slower now. More careful, I need to be clear, Evelyn said after a moment. I'm not saying this changes everything, I'm not asking it to, but it changes something. She continued. Yes, they reached the end of the path and stopped near the park exit. Cars passed beyond the iron gate, moving with purpose, unconcerned. Evelyn looked at Daniel. Really looked at him. The man who had once been her center. The man who now held a piece of her past she hadn't known was missing. I want to see the letter, she said. He didn't hesitate. Okay, not today, she added quickly. I need time, he nodded. I can wait, she almost smiled at that. Almost. Daniel, she said, her voice quieter. What happens if I read it and nothing makes sense? Then we'll sit with that, he said. Together or apart. Whatever you need. Her throat tightened at the word together. They stood there. The morning fully awake now. The moment felt suspended, delicate. I should go, she said. I know. They didn't hug. They didn't touch. They simply stood close, sharing the same air. As she turned away, Daniel spoke again. Evelyn, she looked back. If this changes how you see me, if it makes things harder, I want you to tell me. She considered him for a long moment. Then she said, I already see you differently. His expression shifted. Hope, tempered by caution. She walked away before either of them could say more. As she reached the corner, she stopped and looked back once. Daniel was still standing there, watching her, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. Evelyn turned and kept walking, but the question followed her all the way home, settling deep and insistent. What if the life she rebuilt had been shaped by a truth she never got to read? Evelyn didn't remember the drive home. She remembered stopping at a red light 2 blocks from her house and realizing her hands were shaking on the steering wheel. That hadn't happened in years. She pulled into her driveway and sat there longer than necessary, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. The house looked the same as it always did, neat, intentional, quietly hers, a life rebuilt. Inside, the silence greeted her like a familiar companion. She set her keys down in the bowl by the door, hung her coat, moved through the kitchen without turning on the light. Only when she reached the living room did she stop. The morning sun spilled across the bookshelf, catching on framed photos. Her children at different ages, friends, holidays, evidence of a full life. And tucked on the second shelf, half hidden behind a row of novels, was an old leather-bound journal. She hadn't opened it in years. Evelyn stood there, debating with herself like a woman half her age. Then she reached for it. The leather was worn smooth, the edges softened by time. She sat on the couch and opened it carefully, as if the pages might resist. The dates jumped years. She'd never been consistent, only writing when she didn't trust her thoughts to stay quiet. Her fingers flipped pages faster, slower, until they stopped. The handwriting tightened, smaller, pressed harder into the page. Her chest constricted as she read. I don't know how to say this out loud without breaking everything. Evelyn closed her eyes. She remembered this night now, the rain, the argument, Daniel standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, trying to be calm while she felt herself unraveling. She turned the page. If you ever read this, I hope it's because I was brave enough to give it to you. If not, then maybe it's better. You never know how close I came to staying. Her breath caught. She flipped again. I love you. That hasn't changed. But I don't know how to keep loving you and still recognize myself. Evelyn pressed the journal to her chest, her heart pounding like it was trying to outrun the years. She hadn't written many letters in her life, but she had written this slowly, deliberately. She stood and walked down the hall. The spare bedroom had become a quiet storage space over time. She opened the closet and pulled out a box labeled Old Mail. Her fingers moved quickly now, purpose replacing hesitation. Envelopes, bills, cards. Then there. A folded sheet of paper. No envelope. Edges yellowed. She stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Daniel, her knees weakened. She sat on the bed. I don't know if I'll have the courage to say this in person, but I need you to understand something before I go. She swallowed hard and kept reading. I'm not leaving because I stopped loving you. I'm leaving because I'm scared of who I'm becoming inside this silence. Tears blurred the words. If you ask me to stay, really ask me, I don't know if I'll be strong enough to go. Evelyn pressed a hand over her mouth. The letter ended there. No goodbye. No signature. She stared at the page, heart racing. This was the letter, not sent, not delivered, never finished, a truth suspended in time. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She flinched. A text. Daniel, I wasn't sure if I should reach out today, but I wanted to say thank you for listening. That mattered. She stared at the screen, the letter trembling in her hand. After a long moment, she typed back, Evelyn, I found something. The response came almost instantly. Daniel, what did you find? She hesitated, then typed carefully, Evelyn, a letter, or part of one. It was never sent. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Daniel, are you okay? She let out a shaky breath. Evelyn, I don't know. But I think we need to talk again. This time, the dots stayed longer. Daniel, when? She looked at the letter once more, then folded it neatly. Evelyn, soon, not today. But soon, a pause. Daniel, I'll be here. She set the phone down and leaned back against the headboard. Staring at the ceiling, for years, she had believed the ending was fixed. A clean break. A necessary loss, but now, cracks were forming in the story she'd told herself. And cracks let light in across the state. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, phone in hand. Staring at her last message, he hadn't expected this, hadn't expected the weight in his chest. The sharp mix of hope and fear. He stood and opened the drawer beneath the counter. Inside, wrapped carefully in an old envelope, was the letter he had never opened. He rested his hand on it. After all this time, the truth was no longer quiet. It was waiting, and neither of them knew what it would ask in return. Daniel didn't open the drawer. Not that night. He stood in the kitchen for a long time. One hand resting on the counter, the other curled loosely at his side. The house was quiet in the way only lived-in spaces wore. No echoes, no emptiness. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic, a life rebuilt. He poured himself a glass of water he didn't drink and leaned against the counter. Staring at nothing, he had spent years convincing himself the past was settled. That whatever questions remained no longer mattered because too much time had passed. But time, it turned out, was a fragile defense. He thought of Evelyn's face in the park. The way her expression had changed when he mentioned the letter. Not disbelief, recognition. That was what undid him. He went to bed without turning off the kitchen light. Evelyn didn't sleep either. She lay on her side. The folded letter tucked beneath her pillow like a secret she didn't trust the room to keep. Every time she closed her eyes, sentences surfaced uninvited. Words she'd written in a different version of herself. One who had been braver and more afraid at the same time. At some point near dawn, she got up, she made coffee she didn't finish and stood at the kitchen sink, watching the sky lighten. Her reflection in the dark glass looked older than she felt. Or maybe younger. She couldn't tell anymore. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Daniel, I won't open it unless you want me to. She stared at the message. Her chest tight. Evelyn, thank you. A pause. Daniel, I meant what I said. Whatever you need. She leaned her forehead against the cabinet and closed her eyes. That was the problem. She didn't know what she needed anymore. 2 days passed, then 3. They didn't see each other, but they existed in the same fragile awareness. A thin thread stretched between them, short messages. Careful ones, nothing about the past beyond what had already been said. Nothing about the future. On the 4th morning, Evelyn stood in her bedroom closet, staring at clothes as if they might answer her. She wasn't dressing for romance or for closure. She was dressing to tell the truth. When she arrived at Daniel's place, the street was quiet, tree-lined, familiar in a way that surprised her. He opened the door before she knocked. They stood there for a moment, neither stepping back nor forward. Hi, he said. Hi. She stepped inside. The house smelled like coffee and something warm wood, maybe. It felt lived in, intentional. Like him, he gestured toward the living room. Do you want to sit? Yes. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, a coffee table between them. On it lay an envelope. Unopened. Evelyn stared at it. That's it, she said. Double quotes. Yes. Double quotes. Her heart pounded. You really never read it? No. His voice was steady. I wanted to, but it didn't feel right. She nodded slowly. I found my copy. His head turned sharply. You did? Yes. He waited. It wasn't finished, she said. I didn't send it. He absorbed that in silence. I think part of me hoped you'd stop me, she added. Or come after me. Or ask the question I was too afraid to answer. Daniel's jaw tightened. I thought you'd already decided. I thought you had to. They looked at each other. The space between them suddenly crowded with what-ifs. Evelyn reached for the envelope but stopped short. Before we do anything, she said, I need to know something, okay? If this changes how we remember what happened, how we see each other, are you prepared for that? He didn't answer immediately. Then, I've lived with not knowing for a long time. I think knowing might finally let me rest. She nodded. Slowly, deliberately. She picked up the envelope and turned it over in her hands. The paper was thin, fragile. She didn't open it. Instead, she placed it back on the table. I don't think today is about reading it, she said. Daniel's brow furrowed. Then what is it about? She met his eyes, her voice quiet but sure. About deciding whether we're ready to hear the truth out loud. Silence fell. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying her, something like admiration softening his features. You're still doing that, he said. Doing what? Choosing the harder honesty. Evelyn's lips curved faintly. Some habits don't break. They sat there, the envelope between them. The past waiting patiently on the table. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere, a door closed. Daniel reached forward, not toward the envelope, but toward her. He stopped, leaving his hand resting on the table. Palm open. Whatever happens, he said quietly. I don't want us to run from it again. Evelyn looked at his hand. Then at his face. Her own hand hovered, uncertain. She didn't take his. Not yet. But she didn't pull away either. And in that small, suspended space, the choice ahead of them began to take shape.
Evelyn stayed longer than she meant to. Not because she didn't know how to leave, but because for the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to rush herself out of a moment that mattered. They moved to the kitchen without deciding to. Coffee was reheated. Mugs were switched out. The envelope remained on the living room table, untouched. Like something alive that neither of them wanted to startle, Daniel leaned against the counter while she stood by the sink. Close but not crowded. You always used to do that, he said. Do what? Stand there when you needed to think. Like the answers might rise up from the drain. She huffed softly. It was the light. And the excuse to face away. He nodded, remembering. I should probably go, she said. Though she made no move to pick up her bag. Okay, he replied. Equally still. Another truth slipped between them. They were both waiting to see who would break first. Evelyn turned the mug in her hands. I told you I built a stable life. Yes, that doesn't mean it was an easy one. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. Not pity. Respect. I figured, he said. You always did things the hard way, only when they mattered. Daniel's mouth curved into a familiar, almost smile. It faded just as quickly. Can I ask you something? He said. She hesitated. You can ask. Did you ever regret it? He asked. Not leaving, just how it ended. Evelyn stared at the wall behind him, gathering herself. Yes, she said simply. I regretted the silence. I regretted that we stopped being curious about each other when things got difficult. He exhaled slowly. Me too. She met his gaze. I didn't regret choosing myself. I wouldn't want you to, he said without hesitation. That mattered more than she expected. They stood there. The past no longer pressing quite so hard, but not releasing them either. I need to be honest about something else, Daniel said. Evelyn's pulse ticked up. Okay, I'm not free, he said. The words were calm. Controlled, carefully chosen. She nodded. I assumed. I'm not married, he clarified. But my life isn't empty. There are people who depend on me. A rhythm I can't disrupt without consequences. I understand, she said, even as something inside her tightened. He watched her closely. Do you? Yes, she said again. Because I'm not free either. His brow furrowed. You're not. She shook her head. Not in the way you mean. She stepped back slightly, creating space, grounding herself. I've built something that works, she said. It's not dramatic. It's not a story people would write novels about. But it's mine. And yet, Daniel said quietly. And yet, she echoed. They returned to the living room, not because they wanted to, but because neither of them could avoid it any longer. The envelope waited where it had been left. Daniel stood beside the couch, hands in his pockets. Evelyn remained standing, unwilling to sit, unwilling to lower herself into something she wasn't ready to rise from. If we open it, he said, there's no closing it again. She nodded. I know. And if we don't, he continued, we keep carrying a ghost. Evelyn folded her arms loosely. Sometimes ghosts are quieter than the truth. He considered that. Sometimes. A long silence followed. Evelyn surprised herself by speaking first. When I left, she said, I thought distance would make the ache manageable. I didn't expect it to sharpen it. Daniel's jaw tightened. I thought loving you meant letting you go. It did, she said softly. And maybe it still does. He flinched, just barely. That doesn't mean I didn't wonder, she added. What we might have been if we'd known how to listen better. Daniel stepped closer, careful, as if approaching something fragile. I learned how to listen, he said. Just too late. Her chest ached at that. So did I. They stood inches apart now. Not touching. Not retreating. The air between them felt charged, restrained. I don't want to make promises, Evelyn said. I don't trust them anymore. I'm not asking for promises, Daniel replied. Just honesty. She nodded. Then here it is. He waited. I don't know if there's a version of us that fits into the lives we've built, she said. But I know pretending this doesn't matter would be a lie. Daniel let out a breath that sounded like relief and grief combined. That's enough for me. For now. She reached for her coat. This time when she moved toward the door, he didn't follow. He watched her instead, as if giving her space was an act of care. At the threshold, she paused. Daniel. Yes? If I ask you to read the letter with me someday, she said, will you? He didn't hesitate. Yes, and if I decide I don't want to? Then I won't, he said. I'll live with that. She nodded, grateful for the answer even as it unsettled her. She stepped outside. The afternoon had softened. The light was different now. Lower, gentler. Daniel stayed in the doorway, hands resting on the frame. Evelyn, he said. She turned. Whatever this becomes, he said quietly, I'm glad we didn't stay strangers. Her throat tightened. Me too. She walked to her car, aware of him watching until she drove away. Inside the house, Daniel closed the door and leaned his forehead against it. Just for a moment, he crossed the living room and stood over the coffee table. The envelope lay there. Unassuming, patient. He didn't touch it, not yet. Because now the question wasn't just what the letter said. It was whether knowing the truth would bring them closer or finally teach them how to let go. The week that followed felt strangely suspended. Evelyn went back to her routines, grocery lists, morning walks, the quiet rhythm she'd built so carefully, but everything felt slightly off-center. Like furniture shifted an inch to the left. Nothing was wrong, and yet, nothing was untouched. She found herself pausing in doorways, standing longer at windows, reading the same paragraph twice without absorbing it. At night, she dreamed of kitchens she no longer owned and conversations that ended just before the important part. On Thursday evening, she called her sister. Claire answered on the third ring, cheerful, practiced. Evelyn, this is a surprise. It shouldn't be, Evelyn said evenly. We talk every week. A pause. You sound tense. I saw Daniel. Another pause. Longer this time. When? Claire asked. Recently. Silence stretched across the line. Thin and deliberate. I didn't know you were in touch, Claire said. We weren't, Evelyn replied. We are now. Claire exhaled, a controlled sound. I hope that doesn't complicate things for you. Evelyn closed her eyes. It already has. Evelyn, did you ever take something out of my mail? She asked. The question landed cleanly. No accusation. No heat. Just truth. What? Claire said too quickly. Years ago, Evelyn continued. Around the time I moved out. Did you ever take a letter meant for Daniel? That's ridiculous, Claire said. Why would I do that? Evelyn said nothing. She had learned over time the power of quiet. Claire filled it. You were fragile. You were spiraling. I was trying to protect you. By deciding for me? Evelyn asked softly. Another breath. This one uneven. I didn't think it mattered, Claire said. You were leaving anyway. Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Heavy. Final. It mattered to me, she said. I didn't mean. I know, Evelyn interrupted. But meaning well doesn't erase consequences. They ended the call politely, carefully, with too many words that didn't quite reach what needed to be said. Afterward, Evelyn sat alone on the couch, staring at the wall. The past hadn't been misremembered. It had been altered. Daniel noticed the shift immediately when she texted him that night. Evelyn. I spoke to Claire. Three dots appeared, paused, appeared again. Daniel, and? She stared at the screen for a long moment. Evelyn. She took it. The reply didn't come right away. When it did, it was simple. Daniel. I'm sorry. Evelyn closed her eyes. Evelyn. I am too. For both of us. A pause. Daniel. Do you want me to open the letter now? Her fingers hovered over the screen. Evelyn. No, not yet. Daniel. Okay. That was it. No pressure. No persuasion. She appreciated that more than she could explain. They met again the following Sunday. Not his house. Not at hers, a neutral space. A quiet diner halfway between them that smelled like coffee and old memories. Daniel arrived first. Evelyn saw him through the window before she went in. He looked up as the bell chimed. They smiled at each other, small, careful smiles. How are you? He asked. She considered the question. Honest answer? Always. Unsettled, she said. But clear. He nodded. I understand that. They ordered. Familiar motions. Shared history in the way they both took their coffee. After a moment, Evelyn reached into her bag. She didn't pull out the letter. She pulled out her journal. Daniel's eyes dropped to it, then lifted back to her face. I found what I wrote, she said. The night I left. His expression softened. Did it help? It explained some things, she replied. Not all of them. She slid the journal slightly across the table, not offering it, just acknowledging its presence. I don't want to rewrite the past, she said. I just don't want to keep living inside a version of it that wasn't true. Daniel leaned back, absorbing her words. I don't want to undo our lives, he said. I want to understand them. Their eyes met, steady. Outside, a truck rumbled past. A waitress refilled their cups. Life continued, indifferent and patient. Daniel broke the silence. Evelyn, if we keep doing this, talking, remembering, what are you hoping for? She didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, she wasn't sure hope was the right word. I'm hoping, she said finally, that whatever we choose next is chosen with open eyes. He nodded slowly. That feels fair. They sat there, two people no longer young, no longer naive, but not finished either. The letter still waited, but now it wasn't alone. The truth was gathering around it. And neither of them knew yet whether opening it would bring peace or demand a choice neither was ready to make. The diner emptied slowly. Like it didn't want to rush them. By the time the check came. The light outside had shifted to late afternoon, the sun lower, softer. Evelyn noticed the way shadows stretched across the floor, how time seemed to mark itself quietly now. Daniel reached for the check, then stopped. May I? He asked. She nodded. Yes. It felt easier than it should have. They stood at the counter while he paid. Not touching. Not avoiding each other either. When they stepped back outside, the air carried a hint of cold. Do you want to walk? He asked. There's a path behind the diner, she said. Along the creek. They found it without trouble. Gravel underfoot. Water moving steadily beside them. The kind of place people came to think without being watched. Evelyn tucked her hands into her coat pockets. Claire apologized. Daniel glanced at her. Did it help? It answered a question, she said. It didn't heal anything. He nodded. That makes sense. They walked in silence for a while. The sound of water filled the space where words didn't fit. I keep thinking about that letter, Daniel said finally. Not what it says. What it represents. And what is that? Evelyn asked, a moment where we almost chose differently. She felt that land in her chest. Or where someone chose for us. He stopped walking. She stopped too. They stood facing the creek, not each other. I need to say this, Daniel said quietly. Not to push. Not to sway you. Evelyn waited. If we open that letter, he continued, it won't give us back what we lost. It'll just tell us whether we lost it, honestly. Her breath caught. And if we didn't? Then we have to decide what honesty asks of us now. Evelyn turned toward him. That's the part that scares me. Me too, he said. The creak rushed on. Indifferent, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, not to check it. Just to have something solid in her hand. I don't want to live in regret, she said. But I don't want to live in fantasy either. Daniel watched her carefully.
I'm not asking you to undo your life. I know.
I'm asking you, he said, to let us tell the truth before time decides for us again. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice was steady. Next time, she said. Daniel's shoulders eased slightly. Next time? We read the letter, she clarified. Together. Out loud. He nodded. Whenever you're ready. She hesitated, then added, but after that, we don't pretend it's just information. Agreed, he said immediately. We decide what it means. They resumed walking, slower now. At the end of the path, where the gravel met pavement, they stopped. This time, Daniel didn't step back, neither did she. His hand hovered near hers, close enough that she could feel the warmth. Evelyn, he said, low, careful. I need you to know something. Yes? If the truth tells us we should let go, he said, I will. Fully. Her throat tightened. And if it tells us we shouldn't? He met her gaze. Then we'll have to be brave in ways we weren't before. She nodded once. That was enough for now. They parted without a touch.
But the space between them felt charged with intention. That night,
Evelyn placed the unfinished letter on her bedside table, instead of under her pillow. She didn't read it again. She didn't need to. Across the state. Daniel finally opened the drawer and took the envelope out. He placed it on his own
nightstand. Unopened. For the first time in years.
The past wasn't something behind them. It was something waiting to be faced. Together or apart. And neither of them slept easily. Knowing that the next time they met, the truth would no longer be silent. The morning they chose to read the letter, the sky was clear in a way that felt intentional. Not dramatic. Not symbolic. Just steady. Evelyn arrived first. She stood in Daniel's living room. Coat still on. Hands folded loosely in front of her. As if waiting to be invited into a space that had already been offered. The envelope lay on the coffee table. Beside it, her unfinished letter. Two halves of the same truth. Finally allowed to exist in the same room. Daniel came in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs. He set them down carefully, then sat across from her. They didn't speak right away. This silence was different from all the others. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't defensive. It was deliberate. I want to say something first, Evelyn said. Daniel nodded. Okay. If this confirms what we already feel, she continued, I don't want us to mistake emotion for obligation. He considered that. And if it confirms we were robbed of a choice? Then we acknowledge it, she said, without trying to reclaim what no longer fits. Daniel exhaled slowly. That sounds like you. She gave a small smile. It should. I fought hard to become her. They both looked down at the envelope. Daniel reached for it, then stopped. You should read it, he said. It's your voice. Evelyn hesitated, then picked it up. The paper felt thinner than she remembered. Fragile with age. She unfolded it carefully. Her voice was steady when she began. Not because it didn't hurt. Because she had lived long enough to know pain didn't need volume to be real. She read every word. Slowly, clearly. The fear. The love. The silence she hadn't known how to break. Daniel didn't interrupt. Didn't look away. When she finished, the room felt larger. Quieter. That's not how I remembered it, he said softly. It wasn't how I remembered it either. He reached for his own envelope. This time, he opened it. Inside was a single page. Not hers.
A note, written by someone else. Brief. Well-intentioned. Decisive. You don't need this.
Let her go. She's already gone. Daniel read it once. Then again. He set it down carefully. She thought she was helping. He said. I know, Evelyn replied. But help without consent is still a choice made for someone. They sat with that. Years of misunderstanding didn't vanish, but they finally had a shape. Daniel looked at Evelyn, his expression clear in a way it hadn't been before. I loved you enough to let you go, he said. But I didn't trust you enough to stay present in the silence. She nodded. And I loved you enough to leave, but not enough to tell you everything I should have. Their eyes held. No anger lived there now, only recognition. So, Daniel said quietly, what do we do with this? Evelyn leaned back, breathing deeply. We don't rewrite our lives, she said. We honor them. He nodded. And us? She looked at him. Really looked. The man he had been. The man he was now.
The man who had learned to wait without demanding. I think,
she said slowly, that love doesn't always mean returning. Daniel absorbed that. His jaw tightened, then eased. And sometimes, she added, it means finally choosing without fear. His eyes softened. Which choice is this? Evelyn stood. She walked to the window, looked out at the quiet street. At the world continuing, steady and unbothered. When she turned back, her voice was calm. I choose not to live in regret, she said. But I also choose not to abandon the life I built. Daniel stood too. So this is goodbye, he said. Not accusing. Just present. She shook her head. This is honesty. He stepped closer. Close enough to touch. Close enough not to. For the first time, he said. That feels like love. Evelyn reached out then not to pull him in. Just to rest her hand briefly against his chest. I will always love the man who let me go when he didn't understand why, she said. And I will always be grateful to the man who stayed long enough to understand now. His breath caught. She stepped back. They stood there.
the truth finally spoken. The choice finally made. Later,
Evelyn drove home with the windows down. The ache was there. So was peace. Daniel stayed in the living room long after the door closed. The letters stacked neatly on the table. For the first time, he didn't feel unfinished.
some love doesn't return. Some love releases. And sometimes, that is how it finally ends. Not with loss, but with grace.